The part that makes it hard is the fact that I have met, mashallah, many members of the Uyghur family, and as much as I have met them, I have not heard the full story from them, except when they feel comfortable sharing. As you know, sometimes just because of the fact that all of these things that are happening is very real and it's very contemporary, like it's happening now. Because of that, sometimes you don't hear the full story. The ones who are comfortable sharing, it's very tough to be able to hear. And so I say this knowing that tawakkul is an important topic, but what I will also say is that while I share the suffering from with you guys as a Muslim, I have not endured a fraction of what many of your family members have endured. The second reason it's also difficult is because tawakkul is a very big topic, subhanallah. And we'll go through it and talk about it in a general manner, and hopefully we can talk about some examples that can make it more clear. Those are the two things that make it tough. Inshallah, may Allah SWT accept from us, and hopefully there's some learning that is involved in all of this. So this is a topic on tawakkul, and before I define it, let's just go through a few things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is somebody who we depend on for so many different things. We also know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has many different names and many different attributes, and it is through these that we are able to understand within our own human intellect, with the limited nature of our human intellect, to understand some of the qualities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the Prophet ﷺ, once he had said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has 99 names, and he who memorizes all of them by heart will enter paradise. He said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has these names, and we have to be able to understand them and also appreciate them. So it's not just a matter of just memorizing. And the reason why it's important is because many of the qualities that we know about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we know through these names. And so I'll give you an example, and in fact I'll give you two examples that will help us understand the idea of tawakkul. The first name is Al-Aziz. Al-Aziz refers to the Almighty. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has full control of this dunya. Anything that happens that is good, anything that happens that is bad, anything that happens, whether it be as insignificant to us as like a leaf falling on the ground, whether it is the fact that I woke up this morning and I felt a headache for some random reason and my health was not in my favor. Anything that occurs, say I wake up in the morning and I have rizq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control of all of it. I will do my best to wake up in the morning and go to work, but whether I go to work and I'm able to make money, that's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has control over. Whether I have a family that has 5 kids or I have no kids, that's also in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's control. Whether in the morning I wake up and I feel safe in my own house, whether I feel safe from any natural disaster, that is also in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's control. He is Al-Aziz. And as a consequence, what I realize is that if there's anything that I want in this dunya, if there's anything that I want in the akhirah, if there's anything that I want to improve within myself or with the people around me, I can only depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Qadr is something that every Muslim believes. We know that the fact that all of you are sitting here, the fact that I'm able to give you this talk, I did not have control over this. I know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed me to get in touch with, Sister Arzu. I trusted the fact that there's so many people that have decided to come over to this talk. I had very little control over how some of these things were happening. And so we realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Aziz. And so we depend on him as a consequence, because anything that is in this dunya, any human being will not be able to give me what I want unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants that too. And just like that, we will talk about the second name, the one that we will focus a lot on during this talk is Al-Wakil. Al-Wakil, the one who we trust and the one who we depend on. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes sure that within this dunya, there are always Muslims that are going to be present to be able to help each other and will be able to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are a few narrations that actually describe this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has basically mentioned the fact that his hand or his support is over the jama'ah. What this means is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will always help the Muslims that are sticking together and they worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala together. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also has told us through the narrations of the Prophet ﷺ that the day of judgment would not pass until there's nobody on this earth worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So as long as there's somebody worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will actually have his protection over them. So to be able to prevent all of these calamities of the day of judgment from happening, what we do is that we protect ourselves from the fitan and from all the trials and tribulations of this dunya, and we continue to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For as long as we are doing that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has protected us and He has controlled us. For those who speak a different language, Urdu, for example, is the language that I speak, and it has many similar words to the Uyghur language, and it also has similar words to Turkish. Wakil in our language refers to somebody who is an advocate, a lawyer, for example. So if, for example, I am trying to do a deal with somebody and I loaned them 1,000 dinar, and what I want to do is I want them to pay me back in about 3 months. To be able to do that, for example, if the 3 months pass and they're not able to pay me back, I need to be able to get a lawyer who can actually defend me in the court of law and who will actually advocate for me. So advocation is the other word. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala advocates for us. He is somebody who actually says very positive things about us. When there's any gathering that happens within Muslims, he actually goes to the angels and he praises us in front of the angels. So that is the nature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He always looks out for us. He always protects us and He always cares for us. So those are the two names that I will focus on. The first is Al-Aziz and the second is Al-Wakil. The question now becomes, what is tawakkul? What is tawakkul? Many different scholars try to define it. Once again, the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I mentioned was Al-Wakil, and from that name comes this word tawakkul. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal once said that tawakkul is an action of the heart. It can neither be attained by the utterance of the tongue nor by the limbs. So we won't be able to express it, but this is something that we have to feel within our heart. We have to feel a sense of dependence on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that no matter what evil happens out there in this world, I know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is protecting me and He will continue to protect me as long as I depend on Him. Ibn Rajab also said it is a reliance of the heart on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in bringing the good, driving away the evil matters of this life and the hereafter. Whether, again, there are several examples that come to mind, but if I was to come out of my house and I'm hoping that I'm going to be safe enough to be able to return to my house later that day, the only way that I can do that is by depending on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nobody knows what tomorrow brings. That is the nature of this dunya. Everyone would like to think that the fact that I'm still alive and the fact that food is still coming to me, I will still continue to live for up to 70 years, 65, 70 years. And we know, and as Muslims definitely we realize that we never know when our time is going to come. And so to be able to know whether Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to take care of our family if we're gone, whether Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to take care of our properties when we are gone, all of these are in the control of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, I've mentioned a lot of theoretical aspects. Maybe it's time to mention a bit of a story. The Prophet ﷺ once told us a very, very unusual story from Bani Israel. It's actually a very interesting one. It is mentioned that a man from Bani Israel had actually asked another man for a loan. So similar to the example that I was giving before. One of the men gave a loan of 1,000 dinars to the other man. The man who received the money was very happy because he needed it for a voyage. He had to travel somewhere. And so what the first man said, who gave the money, he said, we're making a business deal here, and why don't we bring a witness so that they can realize that I am giving this money to you? And so what the second man said is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is enough as a shahid. So he is somebody who is going to witness all of this, and he has seen this deal happening, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is enough. So the first man thinks about it, and then he says, okay, how about you give me a guarantee of some sort that you're going to bring it back to me? A guarantee is kind of like the other word we use in English for it is collateral. So for example, I give somebody 1,000 dinar, that person gives me their watch. I have a watch that is very valuable. And he says, until I give you back the 1,000 dinars, you can keep the watch with you. And so this person is basically saying, like, I want a guarantee of some sort that you're going to give it back. Like, how do I know you're going to go away and never come back? And so he said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is enough as a guarantee. And so the first person from Bani Israel, he says, you are correct. And so it's a very interesting deal that kind of happened. This is something that as Muslims, we don't have to do. But if somebody says that, they want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a witness, they're not wrong in kind of requesting that, because Allah is a witness to everything. And so a certain amount of time passes, and the person who took the money, he goes on his voyage, he travels far away, and he goes to an island. His intention is that when he goes to the island, he's going to come back and he's going to give the 1,000 dinars. Days pass and a lot of time passes, and there's no boat to actually take him back to the mainland. So he's kind of stuck on the island. And he's thinking to himself, I have the 1,000 dinars that I had to give back to my friend. I have it with me, but I just can't give it back to him. In fact, I can't even go back to the island. And so what he does is that he makes dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, I borrowed these 1,000 dinars from that man. And you knew this, and you saw that I asked that you be a witness. I tried my best to be able to give this money back by waiting for this boat, but I couldn't find a boat. So, Ya Allah, I entrust it to you. I give you the power so that you can give back this money to my friend. So you know what he does? Just like the image shows, he takes all the money. What he does is that he takes the money and puts it in a piece of wood. It's almost like a log. And he kind of drills a hole inside it. He puts the money inside it, and he puts a note saying that, I am the person who took 1,000 dinars from you. Please take this money back. And what he does is that he takes this log and he throws it into the sea. And he waits, and a boat doesn't come for a very long time. And so what happens is that the person who gave him the money, the lender, he goes out into the coast, and he's like, this person, he went to the island and he never came back. A long time has passed. He saw this piece of wood floating all the way to him, and then he looks at it, and he was very confused, and he was like, I actually have to make some fire for my family. So why don't I just take this piece of wood and I go home? So he takes that piece of wood, and he's starting to prepare it for his house so that everyone can stay warm. And he takes a saw and he cuts it. And when he cuts it, he finds 1,000 dinars inside it. And he says that he actually finds a note. He finds the note inside it, and he says, it basically says, this is the money that I owe you. Please take it back. And several days passed until that person who actually took the 1,000 dinars, he's able to get a boat. He comes back to the mainland. And once he does, he finds that person who gave him the money. And so he says, I was waiting for a boat to come back to you so that I can give you the money, but I couldn't find a boat. And so he says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala paid your loan for you. And so the man was actually confused, because he actually, for one, he didn't know if that was ever going to reach him. And so he says, I'm telling you, I couldn't find a boat to you. So he says, no, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala paid on your behalf whatever you sent in the wood. So even though this is a very strange story, he was able to actually find that piece of wood after a very, very long time. And this is a story of tawakkul. The fact that we go throughout our lives, we don't have any control over what is happening, but somehow every single night we're able to go to bed. Every single night we are able to have some food on the table. Every single night we're able to have some water. And all of these things are part of rizq and part of the sustenance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. We have no control over this. Isn't that strange? And so the reality of all of this is that we do have to have a sense of understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's control. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ وَإِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُهُ زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا وَعَلَى رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. The mu'minun are those whose hearts, they tremble, they shake when they remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of the scholars who's basically talking about this ayah, he says, some people have actually seen a ringworm. It's like a small organism that can actually go inside your body and cause an infection. To be able to treat it in the past several generations, we actually used to use a method of burning them. Nowadays, we have tablets that we can take to get rid of them. But at that time, we actually had a burning incense. Like we would actually take a tool to be able to burn. And when they would burn, they would actually shake. It would almost as though they would simmer. And so he says that's the kind of behavior that our hearts have. When we think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we think about the power that he has, we think, like that is we shake because we realize how weak we are in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. زادتهم إيمانا وعلى ربهم يتوكلون. Whenever we remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it increases our iman. We have more belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We feel more strongly as Muslims, and we have tawakkul in Him. What does this really mean? It means that we depend on Allah in our heart so that He can deliver us any benefit within this dunya and push away any harm. And that is the case with the deen or the dunya, both of us, both of these things. And we truly trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do that. In fact, just like when we need to get from a destination, from point A to point B, what we do is that we take all of our luggage and we put it inside the car. We take all the luggage or we put it inside on top of a camel, for example. What we do with tawakkul is that we're taking all of these burdens and all of this stress and we give it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it doesn't make Him weaker in the slightest. No matter how many of these stresses we take, every single time we have a new stress, we give it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We give it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We complain to Him and we say, Ya Allah, this is so stressful for us to deal with. Ya Allah, there's so many problems that we cannot deal with in this dunya, so much calamity that is happening in this dunya. Oh Allah, it is very difficult for us to take care of it just by ourselves. Please help us and help take care of us. And just like that, we take all of the stress and we give it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another mention is the story of the camel. And many of us may have heard this story as well. It talks about the reality of what tawakkul should look like within our daily lives. Anas ibn Malik had mentioned that there was one time when a man came to the Prophet ﷺ, and to be able to get from point A to point B in Medina, especially if they're traveling a long distance within Medina, they would be using a camel to be able to get there. And so they would take the camel, get to where they need to be. What happened to this man is that he came to see the Prophet ﷺ, and then as soon as he saw the Prophet ﷺ, he realized, oh, my camel is outside and I didn't tie the camel. And if I don't tie it, anybody can take it. If I don't tie it, the camel itself is going to run away. And so instead of going back, he actually goes to the Prophet ﷺ and he says, Ya Rasulullah, I'm having this problem. My camel's outside and I didn't tie it. Should I tie it or should I just have tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control of everything. Why don't I just complain to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and mention, my camel is outside, please take care of it. And so the Prophet ﷺ says, what you should do is you should tie the camel and then you should trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It gives us a very important learning point, which is the fact that whenever we have trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we also do our job as Muslims. So if it means that we wake up in the morning, we are hoping that we have some food on the table, it means that we go to work and we make some money, and along with that we also try to divide up how much money we have. Every person makes this decision every single day. They think to themselves, I only have a certain amount of money. Should I go to the most expensive restaurant? Should I go to the cheapest restaurant? And these types of decisions we have to make within ourselves, because we are human beings, and that's the decision that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala left to us. We have to be able to make those right decisions, and then we have to walk with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What we do is that we basically do our job first, and then we can't just be lazy about whatever we're doing in this dunya. We also have to do basically our work. Maybe what I'll do is, I've mentioned a lot. If anybody had some questions, or if I have lost anybody anywhere, maybe I can ask you guys if there's anything you'd like me to clarify. I assume there are no questions, so maybe I'll continue.
So far, alhamdulillah, everything was so good, and we are listening to you. And I would appreciate if you could speak a little bit slowly, because for me, I have no issues with my English, but most of the sisters who are joining us are from Turkey and Europe, and also I want them to be able to understand everything clearly, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan.
Inshallah. So I'll take it slow then.
Inshallah.
Also, feel free, if you feel that there's some slides that were going that have gone too fast, you can let me know and I can go back to them and do them again.
Okay, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
Yeah. Okay, inshallah. Humans, by their nature, we are beings that lack control. And what happens is that as human beings, Every single person who actually wakes up in the morning, or I should say every human being that is born, they are dependent on their mother for several years. When it comes to small animals, sometimes we see it. We see that a horse is born. As soon as they're born, they're able to get up and start running on their 4 feet. And they can run away, and they start milking, and all of these things happen very naturally. Humans are the prime example of the organism that eventually becomes very intelligent and very smart, but we always remember in and of ourselves that whenever we were young and whenever we will get old, we will be weak. Every human being has weakness. This is the nature and the central emotion that ties us to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we make him do basically we ask him to be able to help us and aid us in all of our struggles. We should always have good thoughts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. What if, for example, somebody is weak, somebody lacks control, and they know that, but they think to themselves, no matter how many times I make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I feel like I'm still weak. I feel like nothing ever happens. No matter how hard I try to make money, I'm still doing very poorly. No matter how hard I try to make sure that my kid does well in school, they're still not paying attention and they're doing very badly. No matter how hard I try to do well in my job, I find that I still keep getting complaints from my boss. So these are always these negative thoughts that come to our mind. The nature of tawakkul is that we should always have good thoughts about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we should always think optimistically about the future. That is the nature of the Muslim, and that is something that the Prophet ﷺ has told us time and time again. It is natural that every person will feel a sense of sadness, but what is important is that we never lose hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is also very, very central to tawakkul. So I mentioned this incident, like the practice of tatayyur in the Arabs before Islam. What they would do is that before they would actually go on a very long journey, they would take a bird in their hand. And what they would do is that they would throw that bird into the air so that they figure out which direction the bird is going in. If the bird is going in the right direction, they would think to themselves, okay, I think it is good for me, I need to go for this journey. If the bird goes towards the left, they think, okay, you know what, maybe today is not a good day, I'm going to go on a different day. Superstition is something that is very much against the nature of Islam. And we never believe in these things where, if I wake up in the morning and the sun is striking me on my face, then it's a bad day. But if I wake up in the morning and I wake up on my side, then it's a good day. So these are the type of superstitions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protects us from by the nature of Iman and Islam. The other thing the Prophet ﷺ has also taught us is that there's no such thing as a bad omen. We should never think that, if a black cat crosses in front of us, that it's going to be a bad thing. We should never have that type of thought in our hearts. If, however, we wake up in the morning and we say, you know what, the weather is amazing, there's a breeze coming in my face, I think today's going to be a good day. The second thing is actually a very positive thing in Islam. What we should think is that whenever we see anything good happening, we should think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us his mercy, and he will keep continuing to give us more mercy. So if there are some people who, for example, they say, you go to them in the masjid and you meet them in the masjid, you ask them, how are you doing? And they say, I'm feeling so good because I'm able to see you. So it's kind of like this. This is a good omen. It is the idea that when something good happens to you in life, it's only good things that are going to follow from that. And so in Islam, we should never think of anything as negative. So when we go to the masjid and we see that one person we don't like, we should never think, oh, I saw this person and I really don't like them, today's going to be a bad day. In fact, we should always be doing the opposite. We should look at somebody who we really like seeing and we say, inshallah, today's going to be a good day. Now, relinquishing control. What this refers to is the fact, similar to what I was saying, when we are going on a long journey and we take all of our luggage, we put it in the trunk, we don't have to worry about it anymore. Just like that, we take all of the issues that we have within our life regarding control and power. What we do is that we take all of that power and we just give it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What that means is that we try to not control our own lives. There are many people who think, when I grow up, I'm going to be 20 years old, I'm going to be doing this job, I'm going to have, I'm going to be married at the age of 25, and I'm going to have so many kids. And how many of us are there who like had all these dreams and hopes in life when we were young, but they didn't happen, right? And so just like that, the people who have a positive attitude with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where we think, I'm going to do my best to be able to get a job. If I don't, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will find a better way for me. That is called relinquishing control. It's basically like you're giving the control to somebody else. And I'm going to mention the story of the 3 men who were stuck in the cave. This is a very, very famous hadith. Abdullah ibn Umar mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ once had mentioned a story. There were 3 men who were basically going on a journey. And unfortunately, on that journey, there was a huge storm that came along. And because of that storm, what happened is that they all got stuck inside a cave. And a rock actually blocked the entrance to that cave. And one of them said, basically he told the other 2 people that were with him, I think the only thing that we can do is to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with some good deed that we have done. So one of them said, Ya Rab, my parents were very old, and whenever they would go to sleep, just before they went to sleep, I would give them some milk before they went to sleep. One day, what happens is that I went very far away and I couldn't come back home until late at night. And so I got the milk and I came home, and just like every single day, I took that milk and I didn't give it to any of my kids. I didn't give it to my wife. I wanted to make sure that my parents had the first drink. But when I came back, I saw that they were asleep. So what I did is that I just waited at their bedside until the morning came. And even though my kids were crying out of hunger, when my parents woke up, they actually had their drink. So, Ya Rab, if I did this for your pleasure, please remove this rock from us and give us the means to escape. And the rock moved a little bit, but not enough for them to leave. So the second man, he said, Ya Rab, I had this one cousin who I actually was really loved. And I, as a man, was very attracted to her as a woman. It came to a point where she wanted some money, and I told her the only way that you can get this money is if you do something haram with me. And so what she did is that she agreed. Just before we were about to start doing something, she said, fear Allah and don't do anything haram. And at that point is when I realized that I made a mistake, and I left away from her and I let her have the money. Ya Rab, if I did this for your sake, then please let us escape. And so the rock moved a little bit. And then the third man also said, Ya Rab, there were some laborers that I had given them their money, and these people were working under me, and I had to give them their salary. One of those men had actually left, and he left, so I couldn't give him his money. So what I did is that I took that money and I invested it. And when I invested it, I made 100 times more, or a significant amount more. When that man traveled and then he came back, what I did is that I gave him 100 times that amount, and I told him, this is your money. And so he said, are you joking with me? And so he says, no, I'm not joking with you. And that man was obviously very surprised. And so that man said, Ya Rab, if I did this for your sake, then allow us the means to escape. And then the rock moved enough so that they can actually leave. It was a long story, but what I mean to say is that these natural disasters, such as the disaster that happened in Turkey, the disaster that happened in Syria, and also part of Lebanon, some of these things we have zero control over, just like these men who actually were blocked inside the cave with a rock preventing them from leaving. If they had been left inside, they knew that they wouldn't have had enough food, enough water, and they would have died. There's so many stories that you're hearing about now. Can you imagine the story of a whole family dying? But because the mother of the family was pregnant, there's one child that she delivered during the earthquake, and that child was still stuck to the mother with her umbilical cord. And that little baby, a newborn, survived while the rest of the family died. Okay? It makes us realize whenever these natural disasters happen, we know that we have no control to prevent ourselves from harm. But if Allah wants to protect us, nothing can harm us. Absolutely nothing can harm us. What can a newborn do? Just like that image I showed a few slides ago, if it's a small baby, a baby has no power to be able to protect itself. But we hear about these stories and we get amazed, and we realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control of everything, and that's why we should be depending on Him. We've talked a lot about tawakkul and what that really means for us, and how we should be behaving within our lives to make sure that we have tawakkul. Now, what happens when we do that? When we have tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what are some of the fruits and the benefits that come? So Umar ibn al-Khattab once he said, if you put tawakkul in Allah the way that you should be having tawakkul in Him, He will give you rizq in the same way that He gives rizq to the birds. Every bird, when they wake up in the morning, they don't have a fridge in their nest. They don't have any stash of food that they have kept. They leave in the morning and they have hungry kids that are, waiting in the nest. They leave, they find worms somewhere, and then they bring it back for their kids. And how is it that these things happen all the time? Every single day they find something, just so that their kids can survive. So what Umar radiallahu anhu is saying is that if we had the same tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will continue to provide for us over and over and over again. Inna Allah yuhibbul mutawakkilin. In Surah Al Imran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also said, Allah loves those who have tawakkul in Him. So what this is saying is that if we have tawakkul, then Allah will love us. And what would we not sacrifice so that we can have the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Don't we all want to attain Jannah? Don't we all want to come close to Him? فَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِّن شَيْءٍ فَمَتَاعُ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَمَا عِندَ اللَّهِ خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَلَى رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. No matter what pleasure you have been given in this dunya, whether it is something that is a fleeting moment, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying is that whatever we're experiencing in this dunya, it's basically a very, very small amount of time. But what is with Allah is far better and more lasting for those who believe and have tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What it's saying is that the ultimate reward for tawakkul is Jannah. And if we want the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and if we want to attain Jannah, then tawakkul is important. Tawakkul is necessary. Tawakkul has to be a part and parcel of the fabric of our daily lives. And this is something that we cannot do without. And so just like all of our scholars have mentioned the stories of people who had depended on Him, people who looked at the sea and they threw some money in the sea, hoping that they would be able to pay back their debt. The mother of Musa alayhi salam, who actually threw Musa into the river, hoping that he's going to be safe and that Fir'aun is not going to kill him, only to realize that Musa ends up in the house of Fir'aun. Can you imagine the kind of worry that she had in her heart? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically given her the comfort and the belief that He is going to protect Musa alayhi salam no matter what. No matter what, he's going to be protected. And ultimately, the person who survives is Musa, and the one who dies is Fir'aun and his army. And so these are the kind of stories of tawakkul that we have, that we should be depending on. And whenever a disaster comes along, we realize that no matter what is happening that is good, no matter if it is bad, we have the belief that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the power to get us out of that problem. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept this from all of us and allow us to be able to have tawakkul in Him. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, may He allow our hearts to constantly be in His remembrance and be constantly softened by some of these verses of the Quran. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to be those who are constantly looking out for our brothers and sisters who are suffering around the world, including the ones in present day East Turkestan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us all and allow us to be able to come together at a time in Jannah when all of us can look back at all the struggle that we had in this dunya and said, we had tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala looked out for us and protected us. Ameen bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. Jazakallahu khairan. Hopefully I did not lose you guys, but please let me know.
Ameen. Jazakallah khair, brother. Very good lecture. That's not only explaining the concept, also you took lots of examples and showing us how to make tawakkul to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in hardship. Jazakallah khairan. If any attendees have any questions, you can write either in the chat or you can open your mic, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. I don't have any questions, but thank you for your time. Thank you for your lecture. It's really educational lecture for me. Yeah, for all of us. I definitely watch after Sister Arzu uploaded the website. I definitely rewatching on the YouTube or however she she uploading in the website. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
May Allah accept. Jazakallah khairan.
Brother, I have a question. You know,
Yes.
nowadays, Uyghurs, we are, I think, standing in a position, the lowest position in our history. You know, we are the weakest position at the moment right now. And our enemy is very strong, not only by their economic, political power, also military, and military on all sides, you know, and also they use them diplomatic relationship with other country to control any information about us and then giving us a wrong image of Uyghurs. It's like now we can see the impact. In the beginning, we thought, you know, who will allow this 1 million people in concentration camp, and then when Uyghur situation categorized as genocide, we thought, how come people keep silence even after acknowledging that it is genocide? You know, we were expecting something happen, and then we still don't see anything is happening. So it is difficult for all of us to understand this situation. And of course, we do believe that we still need to wait Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's victory with patience, but it is still difficult for us. You know, whatever efforts that we are making, our efforts seems very little in front of our enemy. So in this situation, how we can make, you know, tawakkul to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how do we able to show patience and also what do we do, in what aspects that we can understand that our decisions and our actions are considered as tawakkul to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
SubhanAllah. This is the toughest question that you'll be asking me. I'll answer it in a few different ways. Suffering in this dunya will always cause harm to us, but ultimately what it leads to is something that we as humans may not realize. And so let me give an example. We were in North America when basically like 9/11 had kind of happened, and we see the impact of what happened after that. Every single time within our history, even when we look back, several centuries, we see this happening all the time. We realize that there are so many people who will suffer, and because of that, subhanAllah, the Muslims are included within that suffering, and ultimately there is a group of people within those Muslims that will actually turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even more because of the calamity had happened. So for example, when 9/11 had happened, there were so many people that were actually changing their names. If their name was Osama, they would change it to Sam. If their name was Bilal, they would change it to Billy, just so that they would never stand out in front of people. And similarly, time after time, they would start letting go of some of their deen. On the other extreme, there were some people who actually started to learn more about their deen. And they said, so many people say bad things about my deen. What does my deen really say? And they forced themselves to be able to learn more. And from that time until now, what has happened, especially here in Canada, is that there's so many Muslims that have become, accepted as members of society. And obviously, it's not 100%, but at the same time, it is the fact that any woman can actually wear a hijab and she can walk out in the street. There are very, very few incidents where somebody will actually harm you because you're Muslim. But what happened now is actually very different than what had happened 20 years ago, when many Muslims were unfortunately suffering, and they were dealing with people who were ridiculing them and were saying bad things about them. I will also mention another big story from the Seerah, a big story from the Seerah. I should say not the Seerah, I'm sorry. It is from the Islamic history. Ain Jalut is the name of a place that is in Palestine. As you know, and as we know, is that up to, you can say 700 years ago, there were times when many Muslims were actually worried that the Mongols who had come from Mongolia would actually come in and destroy all the Muslims. Can you imagine that Baghdad was basically the capital of the entire Muslim Ummah, and they came to Baghdad not only did they destroy all the libraries, but they even slaughtered all of their women, their children, and all of their people. And all the people in Jerusalem and the people in other cities were getting very worried. And they said, this army is very, very strong. And it's going to come to a point where they'll come by and they'll destroy us too. Until Ain Jalut was basically that area in Palestine today, which is where so many Muslims were actually able to finally push back against the Mongols. A few generations passed, and Mongols, by and large, became Muslim. And it is because of that consequence that my family is Muslim, and it's because of that consequence that many Uyghurs that are living in East Turkestan are Muslim. And so these situations have always occurred in Islamic history where we are on the precipice or on the edge of being destroyed or being hurt, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always finds a way. It unfortunately, as a human being, we're not able to understand how long this takes, and it may happen for several years. But what we do is that we never stop the effort. We never stop the strength with which we are trying to call out to people about Islam and telling them about Islam. Hopefully that kind of clarifies some things, but the one thing I would say is that no matter what harm happens in this dunya, we never realize the consequence until so many years after. So many years after. That's just unfortunately the reality of being a human being.
Jazakallah khairan. There was another question in the chat, and then she wrote in Uyghur language, and she liked to know about taqdir, the destiny, this concept. Could you please give her some explanation on that?
Absolutely.
Jazakallah khairan.
When it comes to qadr, qadr means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who is in control of anything that happens that is good and anything that happens that is bad. And he's not only just in control, he is also aware of what has happened. And so he has it in a book called Lawh al-Mahfuz. Lawh al-Mahfuz refers to everything that has happened to every single human being from the beginning of time until the end of time. The fact that I'm talking to you right now has been written in Lawh al-Mahfuz. The fact that all of you are listening right now has been written in Lawh al-Mahfuz. The Lawh al-Mahfuz is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has full control over. Do we as human beings have control over any of our qadr? Now that's a very interesting question. There are some philosophers that basically try to make it seem as though it is either we have no control or we have full control. And the reality is that it's neither here nor there. It is something in between. So when I wake up in the morning and I go to work, I don't have full control over the fact that I'm getting money for my job. At the same time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also wants me to work so that I can get that money. What I'm trying to say is that the nature of qadr is something that we won't be able to realize the full reality of, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us certain responsibilities. Now, the question always becomes, if I make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will my qadr change? Will my destiny change? And the answer that we know from the hadith and from the scholars is that yes, with the dua that you make, your qadr can actually change. So for example, it may be that I would have grown up to become an engineer. And that was something that was written in Lawh al-Mahfuz. But then Laylatul Qadr came by, and I stayed up in the last third of the night and said, Ya Allah, I want to be a doctor for your sake, and I want to get this job for your sake. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do is that within Lawh al-Mahfuz, He will actually, it is more things that are written. It is basically saying, I was basically somebody who was destined to become an engineer, but because I made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I became a doctor. And then over time, I become a doctor. And so just like that, we have the level of control we have over qadr is as much as Allah allows us to have. When we make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's when qadr can change. The other thing I will also say is that there was a time in the Prophet ﷺ's life when some Sahaba were actually talking about qadr. And when they were talking about qadr, the Prophet ﷺ told us, and he informed us, don't invest too much time talking about qadr, because this is what led the people in the past to be misguided. Because every single time I have anything that is bad that is happening in my life, I will say, well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew that something bad was happening to me. Why would He, somebody who's so merciful, somebody who's so kind, allow me to have any harm? Is He really as merciful or as kind as He says He is? Na'udhu billah. So as human beings, because our understanding is so limited, sometimes it makes us question who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, even though He tells us He is Ar-Rahman, He is Ar-Rahim, He is Al-Aziz. And so if we lose sight of the fact that He is the greatest human being, then we are getting misguided when we're thinking too much about qadr. And so as human beings, we won't understand the full reality of qadr, but what we do understand is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has full control, and He has allowed us to have to make dua so that we can change our qadr as well.
Jazakallah khairan. Very good answer, mashallah. And there's another question in the chat. I think it's more similar to what I asked from you before. Shall I read it for you, or you read by yourself?
Inshallah, maybe you can help me understand, because I do think I've answered some questions, but I feel that there's something that hasn't been answered. But you can let me know.
She said, "Amin to your du'as, and first, thank you for your lecture. Like we that standing in front of big power of China, China's genocide. What is the tie of our camel? And when we feeling weakness, powerless, helpless, and what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala want us to do?"
Tying the camel is something that the person who actually has a camel, they know how to tie it. I am somebody who does not own a camel, and so if somebody was to ask me how to tie a camel, I would never understand. Just like that, if somebody says, in the current economic state and in the current political state that the Uyghur Muslims are in, how do we fix the problem? Even though I don't have the actual answer for that, what I do know is that there are people who do have the answer. There are people who are experts when it comes to understanding foreign relations, and these are people who understand advocacy as well. So in Canada, we have the privilege of actually having some of these people who are government advisors. What they have done is that they have tried to push the Canadian government to actually call what is happening in East Turkestan a genocide. And they had a whole discussion about this. And subhanAllah, even despite all of that discussion, ultimately the issue of Uyghurs, I think, became a lot more known amongst Canadians, and more Canadians even understood that there were Muslims in China, because many didn't know that from before. That's one benefit that came from it, but they didn't call this a genocide. The same experts, what they did is that because they realized that more people know about Uyghurs, they're like, okay, what else can we do? If we cannot call it a genocide, can we at least bring more Uyghurs to Canada? And so just about 2 weeks ago, there was actually a motion that was passed in the House of Commons, where there was a Muslim man. His name is, I think it's Salim Zubairi. Salim Zubairi is a member of the House of Commons. What he did is that he tried to create a vote so that more Uyghur Muslims can be accepted as immigrants in Canada. And because of that, the Canadian government committed to bringing 10,000 Uyghur Muslims to Canada. This number is very small compared to the million that were in the internment camps, but this is one benefit that comes from it. These are the same experts who will say, as time goes along, this is the next strategy, this is the next strategy, this is the next strategy. And we keep thinking about those strategies so that we can protect our brothers and sisters who are living in East Turkestan and at least find some answers. And so the tying of the camel is something that we have to ask the expert, the one who actually knows the camels. And so just like that, the people who actually know more about politics should be the ones answering the question. As a doctor, even though I don't know the full answer, maybe the direction is something that we can all understand and appreciate. The question always then becomes, when we are feeling helpless, powerless, and we are also feeling weak, what does Allah want us to do? The story of the prophets, and from everybody, is that whenever they faced a calamity, they would turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah even mentions that there was a time when even the prophets were tested so much to the point where they even said, the prophet said, Mata Nasrullah. They said, like, where is the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And you can imagine how tough that is for a prophet to be able to say that. Are they doubting that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to help them? No, it is the fact that they're asking for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Rab, give us your help. Ya Rab, give us your help. And so for any calamity that a person goes through, they should be turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And whether that is in the form of dua, in the form of charity, in the form of advocacy, all of these different things are part of the ibadah that we should be doing.
Jazakallah khairan, brother. I think you are right. You know, when we feel weak and powerless, helpless, the best thing we can do is rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and lower our expectation from other people. Otherwise, when we think about, if I put my trust, for example, to the Canadian president or any Muslim leader in the world, and when they cannot offer help, you know, I would feel depressed. Why he doesn't do this? Why those people cannot help us? Why they don't love us? Why they don't care about us? This makes us so tired and so depressed. Instead, you know, the best thing is lower our expectation from other people. And as an Uyghur, you know, I try my best to help my people and try my best to do advocacy. But then, and the other people, they wanted to help. They are not capable of helping us. They are not capable of standing against China while sacrificing their political and economic benefits from China to their, China. So it is, instead of, you know, hoping others that will help us someday, save us someday. No, it is not. I think it's difficult and it's not going to happen. Instead, we rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know, ask help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As you said, dua changes our destiny, even can change our destiny. So while we have a hope from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we don't feel ourselves weak, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with us all the time and He knows everything, whatever we are going through. And He is totally capable of destroying our enemy. Even though China is considered as one of the strongest country, but then their power is nothing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah.
And just like that, Brother Abdullah, I just want to clarify your question. Just dua enough? The question, that question always comes down to like the same slide that we're talking about. What we're saying is that no, dua is not enough. You have to do both. You have to make dua and you have to find these means, these measures to make sure that we can do advocacy and we can teach our future generations, like Sister Salah is saying. There's always some action that is tied to it. The talk is talking about tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we mentioned the fact that it is an action of the heart. What we should do is that we should start from that heart first, and when we fix it, everything else will become very easy. And for many of us who are, you know, like we struggle sometimes to pray 5 times a day, and we do our best to be able to do that. What we know is that if we know in our hearts that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to hold us to account for every prayer, if we miss any prayer, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to punish us, then that forces us to be able to do the action, right? And so because we fix what is in our heart, the action becomes very easy. So that's what we're basically saying.
Jazakallah khairan. Very good explanation, mashallah. Is there any other questions?
Jazakallah khairan. Hopefully that makes sense. And I'm sorry for talking really fast and you know, using a lot of words as well. Hopefully it was clarified enough to mention the topic, but inshallah, let me know if there's anything else that can be improved, inshallah.
Oh, Jazakallah khair. This was excellent lecture in my point, because this taqdeer and tawakkul, these concepts is easy to understand, but then it is difficult to follow, especially when we have hardship. We don't know exactly which decision comes from our desire and which one is, you know, from it is considered as tawakkul to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Jazakallah khairan, you explain with lots of examples, and I really enjoyed.
Jazakallah khairan.
Alhamdulillah, Jazakallah khairan.
Jazakallah khairan. Thank you so much. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from all of you, and thank you so much, Sister Arzu, for doing this.
Oh, Jazakallah khairan. Thank you very much for spending your time and you know, giving us this lecture. It is very beneficial for us.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khairan.